everybody. That was our exciting news intro, countdown, craziness. Super excited that you all joined. Hi, everybody out there. Remember that you can always comment if you are signed in to whatever you're watching us on. You can leave us comments. We can see them, and then we can, talk back to you. So do what it says, which is like, tell us where you're from, say hi. I'm DeVoe, and I founded Parentis, and this is Christina Chu, and she is the curator. And this is all very, very exciting and new and fresh, and we're thrilled that you're here. So this is the Parentis Literary Salon. I hope that is what you are doing. Somebody just thumbed us up, and I could see it. This is so exciting. Thank you. So the theme for tonight is love and loss, and I have to give announcements. I'm so sorry. So first of all, this is April. So all of you who have children under 10, our fellowship is open. So please, apply. The winning fellow gets $1,000. They get a year of mentorship. They get to take part in our accountability meetups. This year, we actually sent Dawn Ryan to AWP, so she got to go and experience that. We really try to help you out in your career. All you have to do is write brilliantly and have a kid who's under 10 years old. That's it. And we would like it if you would write something new, because our goal is to keep writers on creative track after they have kids. And so that is our gift to you is the fellowship, and hopefully you'll write something new, and that'll be a gift too. I do want to thank our sponsors, because it was really nice of them to give us money, particularly to all of course, our title members who are repeat donors, and we appreciate your subscriptions, and also to our board, because they're awesome. And then also to Heidi Asundi, Elizabeth Coleman, Elizabeth England, David Harris, and Frank Haberly, who donated tonight before they came. So let me pass this on to Christina Chu, and she will tell us more about love and loss.
Hello, everyone. So this month's theme is love and loss. I'm really I think it's the right time for the salon. We actually curate by theme, and we plan these pretty far out, but who knew that we'd be living in this pandemic, right? And, we've at this point surpassed something like 560,000 deaths from coronavirus. It's a huge number, and yet it doesn't come near the vastness of the loss when we remember that we're dealing with people, not digits, right? People with family and loved ones, whether it's a grandparent or a friend or a neighbor. So people who, this salon's for you guys, like really, Parentis we really believe that literature gives us a chance to connect, and Parentis especially is all about community and connecting, and really words that resonate with you, and people's novels and essays, when you read them and they resonate, you feel less alone. So tonight we have 3 amazing authors who will share their stories about love and loss and discuss their work and their experiences. So I'm really thrilled to introduce. Our first reader will be Marion Fontana. She's a writer, actress, and playwright whose work has been accepted in the New Yorker, Vanity Fair, and many others. Our second author will be Melanie S Hatter. She's the author of 2 novels, 1 short story collection, and she's the winner of the inaugural Kimbilio National Fiction Prize. Our third author tonight will be Marion Winik. She's the author of The Big Book of the Dead and winner of the 2019 Towson Prize for Literature. So everyone, please welcome our authors.
Yay! Authors. Yay! And I want to really quick just give a shout out to some of the people that have said hello to us that are already watching and talking to us. Amy Gratch, who I know from Twitter, and Loretta Shapiro, who is a longtime listener, and Helene and Ashley and Mai, and Helene said hi to Loretta and Mai. They're just having conversations in the chat. It's really cool. And I think, did I just see Devin? Yes. And so just really thrilled that you guys are out there. Thank you. Do not forget that you can ask us questions too and make comments. And that's it. Okay, now we can read. Now we can do our readings. We'll be calm again. We'll be love and loss. Okay.
Love and loss.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Yes, it is beautiful. And I'm really excited. So our first reader tonight will be Marion Fontana. I'm going to give you a longer, well, you know, all these authors tonight, they had these bios that were like, they just went off the page. So I had to kind of make them smaller, but they're all incredible writers with accolades up the wazoo. So Marion Fontana is a writer, actress, and playwright, like I said. She's been excerpted in the New Yorker, Vanity Fair, Salon.com, The Guardian, the Boston Globe. Her memoir, A Widow's Walk, was featured as top 10 great reads by Washington Post and People magazine. Her essays were included in the anthologies Money Changes Everything by Jenny Ophil and Alyssa Chappelle, and The Time of My Life by Rob Spillman. Her play, Falling Short, was selected for Summer Shorts and reviewed in the New York Times. Her play Glove Connection was performed at the Kingsway Boxing Gym. Fontana is a mother to one, and she lives in Staten Island. Everyone, please welcome Marion Fontana.
Yay!
Thank you. Thanks for that introduction. I appreciate it. I took some stuff out of the vault. I actually living upstate now since COVID, but so it's really nice to see people because you don't see many people up here. I took some stuff out of the vault because this is old. My son's 25 now, so this is a long time ago, but I thought it was fitting for the theme tonight, and it's called Waterproof. It is pouring rain, and I'm late for the first parent-teacher conference at my son's new school. I recently moved from Park Slope, Brooklyn to Staten Island, hoping for a fresh start, but instead I am back where I grew up, walking through the heavy wooden doors of my grammar school, PS 45. The industrial green paint is the same. The wide halls echo, and the strange smell of sour milk still lingers. Even the bulletin boards are the same, adorned with construction paper turkeys made from traced hands. Aiden's second grade teacher is still here too, Mrs. Withers. Standing under 5 feet tall, she can easily be missed as a student, were it not for her being in her mid-60s with a slight stoop. She has close-set brown eyes and a gray bob. Come in, she says, seeing me rushing down the hall. Have a seat, she says, sitting, not behind her desk, but in one of the small plastic seats. I sit across from her, winded and soaking wet. How's Luke, she asks of my brother, who she had in her class 14 years ago. He's in India for a year, I tell her. I watch her take out Aiden's folder from a pile. Her pale pink lipstick bleeds into the wrinkles on her lips as she reads from his folder. Aiden's doing very well, she begins. He's really smart, has a lot of friends, and he's funny. The word but is coming. I can feel it. But I'm very concerned about how little focus he has, she says carefully. Well, he lost his dad last year, I say, and she nods. I know, and I'm so sorry. That can be a part of why he is struggling. I remember holding Aiden's small, clammy hand as we stood at the edge of Jones Beach, throwing Dave's ashes into the wind. My thoughts float, suspended, like soft, chunky ash in the wind on that day, making it hard to listen, even when I need to focus. And an evaluation for a learning issue could help, she is saying. I nod and pretend to be paying attention as I shift in the tiny chair. Is he disruptive, I asked, already knowing the answer, that I mistakenly thought a change of scenery could fix. Well, yesterday, she said, pulling her cardigan around her, we were all on the reading rug for math time. It was a book about a mom who brings cookies into class, and as the students eat the cookies, I have the kids subtract. I give them chalkboards and chalk so they can write down their answers. That's cute, I say, picturing a rug full of cross-legged kids writing numbers. He struggles with math, I jump in, assuming he wrote down the wrong answers. Well, actually, the problem was every time he held up his board, it said, got milk. I clamped my lips together to keep from laughing. I know it's funny, she continues, but it distracts the other kids. I nod rigorously, oddly relieved. After the conference, she walks me to the door, her feet taking 2 steps for each of mine. I thank her and promise to have Aiden evaluated. Another item from my list that is longer than my overdue book. Aiden's very special, she says sincerely, gently placing her hand on my back, and I clamped my lips together again, this time not to cry. Thank you, I whisper, leaving, running through the rain back to the safe haven of my car so I can breathe. I sit trying to gather my thoughts, watching raindrops slide down the windshield in slow-moving rivulets. My phone vibrates and I dig in my purse trying to find it. I rummage through chapsticks, tissues, gum wrappers, receipts, and lipsticks. When I finally find my phone, there is a linty gummy bear stuck to it. I sigh, realizing my bag is as messy as Aiden's mind and it's all my fault. The call is from my editor, who is wondering when I will hand in my book. I never should have been a writer. It's like having a paper due for the rest of your life. I pull down the visor and slide back the mirror, where I notice mascara is smeared under my eyes in thick, blotchy streaks. Licking my finger, I wipe my eyes, cringing as I realize I sat inches from Aiden's teacher, looking like Alice Cooper. I want to scream, as I often have in my car, but there are parents walking by and my phone is ringing again. I put my head on the steering wheel and close my eyes. I imagine Dave next to me, laughing at the absurdity of it all, his square hand on my thigh and his voice in my ear whispering, everything will be okay. Thank you.
Yay!
That was beautiful. Thank you. Wow, Marion.
Amazing.
That was wonderful. And I love that line about writing being like having a term paper for the rest of your life.
That was so great.
It does feel that way.
It totally is.
And just so you know from the comments, it's Helene says it's so familiar. It sounds like my mother-child relationship. Devin said, sounds like he was a genius, got milk. It's good. There's a lot of good comments. Yeah.
It's so funny.
So just quickly, I was wondering if you moved back to your childhood area, what was that like? Did you have to deal with like your younger person's demons and the demons that were going on at the moment? How was that like?
Yeah, it was weird. I love Park Slope. I didn't want to leave, but my husband died on September 11th, and we lived in the neighborhood, and he worked, the firehouse was 8 blocks away, and I just felt bad for Aiden because I couldn't go anywhere without bumping into lots of friends. I taught there for 10 years, so students, and I never really got to be alone with him, and I felt like he needed some dad figure. So my parents still live there. My mom found me an amazing house around the corner that was an old barn from the 1800s. And so I moved, and really it was to give Aiden some time with my dad. I felt like I just couldn't be both parents, and it was weird. It was I never thought I'd go back to Staten Island. When I left, I was like, bye. So it was odd, and it was especially odd, seeing people I'd grown up with who knew what was happening, and but there was a lot of there was peace there that I was looking for too.
Can I ask did that affect your writing? Like, did you freeze for a while? Or were you able to use the emotions to write through?
Yeah, I didn't write for a while, to be honest. I was so stunned, and I was rehearsing a one-woman show about motherhood, honestly, called Monologues, and I had interviewed 15 women about their birthing experiences and was rehearsing that when everything came crashing down, literally. And so I had no desire to write. I've always kept a journal. I did keep a journal, and I'm really glad I did, because I forgot everything. Everything was spinning so fast. I was going to 3 funerals a day. 9/11, we lost all our friends. And so I would have forgotten everything if I had not kept a journal. So I'm really relieved I did that. But I really didn't want to write. I had no interest in writing. I was heavily pursued by this one agent who was like, you should write a book. I never intended on writing a book. I was a screenwriter and a playwright. I never imagined writing a memoir. And then, I really, she said, when your world slows down, I think you should write this down. And I'm really glad I did, for my son's sake, because
when did that change happen? Because you did write it, so.
Yeah.
I mean, here it is.
Well, I was making my living as a writer for the first time, which was exciting when everything happened. I was writing for Martha Stewart. So I did continue that, although that felt like weird to be writing about what things to do with your kids in a car on a road trip when, I'd be at a funeral for 3 hours. It was an odd disconnect. But yeah, I think it was really knowing that everything was so sharp and clear. And I'm sure Marion Winik remembers this too. It's just so sharp in my head that I knew it was going to blur quickly, just how memory is, So it was actually my brother-in-law, my late husband's brother, said, if you don't write this down, you're going to forget, and you should. People want to hear what you have to say. And you're a writer, and Dave would want that. And so I did, and I'm glad I did, because I truly...
We're all glad you did.
Oh, thanks.
And Devin Sandiford would like to know what your son does now, if you don't mind. What is his study?
Who doesn't want to brag about their kid? Yeah. He just got his first apartment. I'm really happy, on Staten Island. Go here. I actually gave him like an ultimatum that he had to get out, and he chose to move in with my parents, which at first, when he was 23, I was like, oh, this is bad. But then COVID happened, and he ended up keeping an eye on my 80 and 83-year-old parents and taking care of them and bringing them food and masks and gloves. And he grew up. I mean, he really grew up. I think COVID made him grow up, and he was about to go on tour. He's an audio engineer. And he was about to go on tour, and it all got canceled with COVID.
Yeah.
And as disappointing as it is, I got him a job with my friend who writes for Netflix, who was going crazy because she has an autistic son, and she was writing from home, couldn't find anyone. I said, I have an odd feeling my son would be good at that. And lo and behold, he is really good at it. He loves it. He's now got a few kids. It's his calling. So
and it's a whole new industry, like in-home Zoom tutoring. What is it?
Yeah.
An educational assistant for Zoom person.
Exactly. Well, he takes them out. They go out. The kid that he's with is obsessed with trains. So they mask up and they go on subways and long walks and weird parts of town and boroughs that I've never been to. And they have a blast. So
Sounds
it's worked out great. Yeah.
We should probably move on. And we're going to get back to really having a whole conversation with everybody, but we got to get more readings in first.
Absolutely.
Who's next, Christina?
Wonderful. Our next reader will be Melanie S Hatter. Like I said, she's the author of 2 novels and 1 short story collection. Her book was selected by Edwidge Danticat, Malawi Sisters, right? It's a novel. And it won the inaugural Kimbilio National Fiction Prize. The Color of My Soul won the 2011 Washington Writers Publishing House Fiction Prize, and Melanie received a 2019 Maryland State Arts Council grant. Her stories have appeared in Defying Gravity, Fiction by DC Area Woman, The Whistling Fire, and others. She's a participating author with the Penn-Faulkner Writers in Schools program and lives in DC, in the DC metro area with her grown son. Everyone, please welcome Melanie Hatter.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this. It's back pre-COVID. I had the honor of getting to meet Parentis, and I'm so excited to be part of it again. I do want to read a little bit from my novel, Malawi Sisters. This is a story about the shooting of a young Black woman by a white man. And I also want to acknowledge Dante Wright in the shooting most recently. And I just, it's never ending. And so my book, I think, is just continuing to resonate. The purpose of the book was really to give voice to the families that deal with this. So the section that I'm going to read is from the mother's point of view. The flight home was a blur. Bette dragged herself up the dark stairs to their bedroom. All she wanted to do was sleep. Malcolm flipped on a light that burned her eyes. He was talking about the funeral arrangements. Call Sully in the morning, he said. Sully, of Sullivan's funeral home. Sully's wife, Joy, always wore the prettiest suits. But Bet didn't want to call the funeral home and talk about burying her daughter. I'm not calling them, she screamed, then slammed the bedroom door behind her. Hysteria lived in her throat, in her head, and burst out of her mouth at every opportunity. The door opened instantly, and Malcolm stood, a dark silhouette in the threshold. I have to get back to work in the morning, he said, with that self-important tone. The Honorable Judge Walker. So very important, master of his domain, she thought. She almost spit at him. How can you just go back to work as if everything is normal, as if we were just gone for a few days' vacation at the beach? She glowered at him, but he said nothing. You are heartless, Malcolm Walker. You always bury yourself in work when things get tough. Not this time. This time, it's our daughter. He narrowed his eyes at her and shook his head, then turned and walked out of the room, like he always did, walked away at the slightest hint of discord. He wouldn't stay and talk, face the truth. She screamed after him, You're a piece of shit, Malcolm Walker. The honorable piece of shit. Who didn't feel anything. Not ever. Bet rushed into the bathroom and made it just in time to vomit into the toilet. Nothing but bile. She settled on the floor and leaned against the bathtub, convinced she was dying. Take me, God. Take me and bring Malawi back. She had taken several over-the-counter sleep aids and had slept for several hours, but woke with a dull ache in her shoulder and nausea in her stomach. Take as needed, the label read. She considered taking all the pills at once, certain that God was punishing her for not being a better mother. Her throat was dry. She dragged herself up to standing and ran cold water into the sink, cupping her hand and lapping from her palm. She'd eaten little in the last few days, and whatever she ate came back up. On the flight home, Malcolm had suggested a visit to the doctor, but Bet couldn't get herself motivated to go anywhere. She felt again the sting of entering Malawi's apartment. Her daughter's flowery fragrance on her clothes and her presence in every room. She had wanted to be strong, to tidy up, gather, and organize Malawi's things, perhaps take some items home and tag what should be shipped and what should be thrown away or donated. But then she couldn't do it. She just wanted her daughter back. In the distance, she heard the house phone ringing, Danita's voice leaving another message about the upcoming fundraiser for the Arts Foundation. Danita had left 4 messages asking if Bet had found a location, as if that was of any importance now. Who cared about the Arts Foundation anymore? She grabbed a washcloth hanging on the shower door. She sniffed it, then, smelling nothing sour, rinsed the cloth in warm water, wiped it over her face, and staggered back to bed, burying herself entirely under the covers. All these years being faithful to the church, and now this. And as for Malcolm, she couldn't deal with his life goes on philosophy, his almost obsessive need to maintain control, going about his business as if it were a mere acquaintance who had died. He couldn't just continue on as he always did, not when it was his daughter. The phone rang again, loud at the side of the bed. Bet curled into a ball and pulled the covers over her ears. She wished she was like him, like she didn't feel anything at all. Thank you.
That was beautiful. I love that. Well, one of the things that we all have in common here is that we're all parents, and while all of us are very invested in our careers, I think that moment when you're like, who cares about the art organization, right? Like that is so. It really hit me. Like, wow, that's so on. Like the thought of losing a child is like. I can't even go there, but I really appreciate that you did go there, because I think people need to read that now.
Yeah, and I will never ever see Take as Needed again the same way.
Yeah.
Like
So Melanie, how long did it take you to write that book?
It actually didn't take that long. I was on a 30-day retreat in Bali, actually. So it was a nice opportunity for me to sort of have headspace in this very dark and often, just disturbing information that I was writing about, but then being in a very beautiful environment. So I was able to sort of balance that. So in the 30 days, I wrote the bulk of the book.
Wow.
That's amazing. Yeah. So was it a writing?
It was a writing retreat. Yeah.
Or was it something that you organized, or was it something that you've discovered?
No, it was organized. Mastin Kipp he's a motivational speaker, and he had organized. He'd been doing these annual retreats in Bali, and he was sort of writing his own, and brought a whole host of folks. It was about 30 of us, and it was absolutely phenomenal experience. And it was really, I think it helped me to be, in a place of beauty, but also so far removed from the United States and what was happening here, that I was able to sort of, just lose myself in this story. It is inspired by a real event, a real shooting that had happened.
Can you talk about that, please?
Yeah, it was Renisha Mcbride, who was a young woman. She was 19. She had been out late at night, had an accident in her car, went to get help at a nearby house, and the man, she's a Black woman, the owner of the house was a white man, and shot her at his door. Didn't even ask why she was in, just shot her. And when I saw that news story, I mean, this wasn't new, sadly. Trayvon Martin had happened. There was there was just sort of a whole host of things that were going on, but there was something about this particular story. It just seemed so relatable. I remember breaking down at the side of a road and, in the middle of nowhere. And, I just remember, sort of being in those similar kind of situations, and the thought that somebody felt justified in, shooting and killing this person. I couldn't get it out of my head. But what I kept thinking about the most, because all of these headlines, they're in the news. They talk about, the victims and the circumstances. And then they, of course, try to paint the victim as, well, they were doing something wrong anyway. So, but what I kept thinking was, these people have families. Like, regardless of whether the person was committing a crime or not, there's families behind these individuals. And that was what I wanted to get at with Malawi Sisters, that this grief, it's community. I mean, for the Black community. I mean, we've been grieving for years now, and it just doesn't seem to end. And so I wanted the Walker family to kind of represent that, just this sense of loss that we are perpetually in right now.
I think what you did, Melanie, is so important, to take and isolate the story, and because in the beginning there was a sort of piling on of, and then there's this story, and then there's this story, and then there's this, until it became a sort of sea of injustice. Right. And then once it became a sort of like an ocean of injustice, it was hard to then see the humans as humans again. In Soho, they were painting faces. I don't know who it was. A street artist was painting the different faces, and they were, human, beautiful people, right? Each person. And I think that in selecting only one of the stories to turn it into a novel, it really reminds us that, like, yes, there are lots, but I mean, it's horrible that you could think of, like, I could do a whole collection of these, right? And how horrifying is that? Like, I'm not kidding. Like, that is like horrible.
No, absolutely. I when I was asked, do I want to have a dedication page, right? And I thought, yes, I want to acknowledge, all of these people. And I started putting together a list, and
Must have been pages.
it was pages. And I there was not enough room. There just wasn't enough room in the book to list all the up to that point. And when I think of how many more names have been added to that list in the last year, 2 years, it's horrifying.
What I really appreciate about this is that I think people talk about the person who was killed, and that's important, but they totally forget about all the people who are left behind and how it destroys their lives, and and it doesn't end for them, right?
Right. And that's it. I mean, grief continues on, And that's what I wanted to remind people, that, you can glaze over with another headline. It's sort of, here we go again, and you just kind of move on. But I thought, no, there's family behind this. And that's what I wanted to really show, that there's humanity here. And, it's chilling, just how quickly we sort of move on.
No, I agree. It becomes like numbers.
Yeah, it is. And it's, I mean, I feel it myself, I turn the TV off because I'm just, I can't, I don't want to deal with the emotional burden that every shooting creates. And you turn it off, and you go find another book, or you go find whatever, you go walk the dog, and you try not to think about it. But
that's absolutely the dilemma, isn't it? It's like you want to feel it, and at the same time you want to protect yourself,
right?
Because other things, maybe in your own house something is happening that's like small, and but right. That whole balance of like, how much of the world can we encompass as our burden is a really huge and interesting question. And especially as a writer, because in a way, like, we're the communicators, we are the ones that know how to say things in ways that are powerful. So how much of this is our burden? How much of it do we take on ourselves to say, like, well, I actually really should be writing something very important because I can. Yeah.
And I mean, there is an element for me that I feel like I need to witness, I need to watch the videos because I need to witness. So there is that element of it, but you do have to balance it. And I think with the pandemic, hopefully, as a society, we understand that people need balance between the horrifying things that are happening in the world, but being able to protect ourselves.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I also think that sharing the stories was clearly helping other people. I just wanted to read to you, Devin said in the comments, this June will be 30 years since his mother's youngest brother was shot and killed by the police. And he is very grateful that you've written this. And his family is still dealing with the grief. So it definitely resonates in the community and outside the community too. And I have chills, even though, my white skin has chills. But okay. So after talking about how we can't move on, let's do the next one. No, it's okay. It's a great transition. I told all these guys backstage that, like, my way of dealing with really difficult situations is to laugh. And so I'm going to be super awkward. So I just want to apologize to everybody out there. I'm not laughing I am laughing because I am, like, it's really hard to sit in difficult, painful places for me personally. So sorry, man, I'm not the right host for this.
You're a great host for this.
You are.
I care. Okay, so we should get the next reader so we can really get really deep, and then we don't have to stop.
Our final reader is the incredible Marion Winik. She is the author of The Big Book of the Dead and winner of the 2019 Towson Prize for Literature. She's written 9 books, including First Comes Love and Above Us Only Sky. Her column, Bohemian Rhapsody, appears monthly at Baltimore Fishbowl, and her essays have been published in the New York Times, The Sun, and elsewhere. She's a book reviewer for Newsday, The Washington Post, and Kirkus Reviews. She hosts the Weekly Reader podcast at WYPR. She was a commentator for NPR for 15 years, and she's won an NEA fellowship in creative nonfiction. Winnick is a mother of 3 and an ex-stepmother of 2. She's also expecting her first grandchild. Yay!
Yeah.
That's because of the puppy. So I've reviewed the book of everyone here. I've reviewed Marion's book, I've reviewed Christina's book, and I've reviewed Melanie's book. And these are 3 great books. So it's so fun looking at each of you and thinking about the books, and the passages that were read were so vivid to me. And anyway, I love being a book reviewer because I love reading, even as much as writing, or maybe even more. And it's just a real privilege to be able to help other writers when you love their book so much. So I guess I came in thinking about reading something really sad, and then I ended up changing my mind, and because to be the balance that we were just talking about. And also this fits with what Marion said about you got to write things down when they happen so you can remember them. And it's also fits in with my lifelong habit of taking my most terrible and or humiliating experiences and immediately turning them into a personal essay. So this is very recent, and it was my column last month in the Baltimore Fishbowl, and it's called The Zoom Box of Dorian Gray. Let us begin by recalling the story of Dorian Gray, as conceived in 1890 by the great Oscar Wilde. Dorian was a hot young honey who sat for a life-size portrait by his painter friend. Not long after the painting was completed, Dorian started hanging out with a crowd of hedonists and Eurotrash and began to pay the price of fast living. One hungover morning, staring blearily at his portrait, he realized he would soon be old and ugly, and yet the picture would remain perfect. If only it could be the opposite. This wish became a curse, and over the years, as Dorian continued his carousing, he stayed young and beautiful, while the image in the portrait grew haggard and hideous. The story continues from there, ending badly for poor Dorian, but what's important here is the bizarrely transformed portrait. I thought of it the other day when I watched the Zoom recording of a literary event I had moderated the night before. Shocked to see what might be described as the Dorianization of Marion. One long year ago, when our lives on Zoom began, I, like everyone else, began to regularly endure the weird experience of watching myself talk. My own face was uncomfortable, but also hard to look away from. In some ways, I looked a little better than I thought I would. In some ways, not. As the year went on, I often had to appear at special Zoom events. For the more important of these, I would sometimes put on makeup and try to set the laptop at a flattering angle. Sometimes I wouldn't. If these events were recorded, I never watched them, so I'm not sure how I looked. Until last Wednesday. This was the day I watched the recording of an event I had moderated the night before for Baltimore's City Lit Festival, one that drew an audience of hundreds of fans of the writers Jenny Offel and Emily St. John Mandel. And I saw that while the other participants were nicely dressed and made up and sat placidly in front of their bookshelves, in the strangely blurry Zoom box of Marion Winik, we saw something else entirely. A great squinty-eyed crone in a Patagonia fleece vest rocked back and forth, picked up her dog, stood up and wandered around, taking the computer with her, and occasionally slugged a clear beverage out of a glass. At one point, she seemed to be, pulling a stray hair out of her mouth? She had puffy cheeks and frowny furrows, and if she owned a hairbrush, it certainly had not been used in the last 24 hours. Some may have wondered what the clear liquid in the glass was, after all. What happened, Dorian? Well, like many of you, I have been mostly alone in my house with my cat and my dog for months. I sit on the couch in my living room working about 15 hours a day and often pour a glass of something at 5 to change the vibe. It's been a long year and a slippery slope as far as hygiene, wardrobe, decorum, and sanity are concerned. I literally have to try to remember to get out of my pajamas and robe to teach classes that start at 5:30 p.m. On the Tuesday in question, I had crawled out of bed at 5 in the morning to try to get a vaccine appointment because I just learned that higher education workers were now eligible. I did get an appointment, which was great because I was about to become a grandmother, but that's another story. This was the beginning of a very long day. I had two-hour Zoom sessions with different grad students, then opened the Zoom for my Tuesday night class, and 2 hours later went straight to the City Lit Festival. I was starting my 7th hour on Zoom. I didn't realize that anything bad had happened until the middle of the night, when I woke up with the nagging feeling that I had looked like a crazy hermit and acted like a drunk. The next day I watched the thing, which of course will live forever on Facebook, and immediately started sending my apologies to all concerned. Are you okay? Asked the City Lit coordinator, who admitted to being baffled by my casualness. Well, good question. Just days later, the glorious moment of my COVID vaccination arrived. As an anxious, aging recluse, I was terrified that something would go wrong, but no. My car started, I found a parking spot right in front of the store, and exactly 5, I rolled up my sleeve and the nurse injected the shot in my arm. She said I had to stay in the store for 15 minutes to make sure I didn't have a reaction. Well, in fact, I was already having a reaction, a teary-eyed, emotional one. It's ending soon. And among all the good things this entails, it means we will go back to having readings in bookstores, classes in classrooms, and meetings in offices, instead of all of it happening right here in my living room on my overworked, underpaid blue couch. Dorian stopped obsessing about that portrait, hit pause on the nightlife, and lived to be a sweet, wrinkly old man playing with his grandchildren.
Yay!
That was so awesome. I think I could listen to you for hours, Marion. That was just so amazing.
Oh, that's
Well,
so
I could have been, so many different sad stories I could have told, but I really do think it's true that, this was actually a pretty bad experience. It's funny now, but I felt so embarrassed. It was like, so as I said, I often use my writing to recover from disastrous experiences of one sort and another, and sometimes they're this sort. So.
And it fits in Love and Loss because you lost your dignity. And then but not your humanity and not your humor. And that's the important thing, not losing your humor. Oh, that must have been, what's really funny is we know Carla very well. We love her.
Very confused, to say the least.
And I could see her being very kind about it too. Are you okay?
I'm usually a really good moderator, but I just I don't know, try when you're on Zoom for 7 hours, you just start going crazy. And
hi, Polly.
Oh, hello.
Wally. Okay.
And you were telling us that you actually lost your other dog, which is how you.
I almost read that one, but I went for the not sad. Oh, and my grandchild is born.
Oh, congratulations!
Congratulations!
That's amazing.
March 16th. So I am.
Yay.
Yep.
That's wonderful.
So,
yeah.
Marion, I'm not actually surprised that you are on your 7th hour because the amount of stuff that you do, I'm amazed that you actually even sleep. How do you juggle life, like all the different aspects of it? And now you're going to have a grandchild. So,
well,
you're going to fit that in.
Boston, and I'm in Baltimore. I mean, I am now all by myself with nothing to do but work, so I honestly really do work sometimes like 15 hours a day, but my work is reading and writing. So I don't care, and it's the pandemic. So there's nothing else to do. And, I actually had to go on a diet because I gained so much weight from eating and drinking all the time. But anyway,
you're just finding all the losses.
I think the fact that I'm productive now really isn't that surprising because I have nothing else to do. But, in my early motherhood, I also found that I could get more done than I thought I could. But, in those days I had to make arrangements to work. I couldn't work all the time, but I always have, it's just so important to me to read.
Let's open this up a little bit. I want to see if I want to get everybody. Yeah. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about like early motherhood. You all have kids. You all had to juggle super interesting careers and really, active everythings. You're all very powerful powerhouses of humanity. You all do more than just sit and write one thing. So talk about it. Talk about how like your journey through motherhood and writing and how those two things interacted and when was it good and when was it awful and how did you get through those awful? Just quick.
Let's start with Marion since she was
Marion. Which Marion?
The other one.
Oh, me?
Yeah.
I know it's confusing. I'm not used to having two Marions.
It's kind of lovely. It's like a game show. Marion.
Oh, and I
Marion,
love
Marion.
Marion. So I'm so honored to be reading with her. I was thinking about that, when you guys introduced the theme, and I have to say, it's amazing to me that the things I got done when I was younger in the limited headspace that I had, I remember writing on deadline for Martha Stewart magazine with my husband wrestling with my son on the bed next to me and was totally focused. And the difference now is I'm in total silence in the country. And if my boyfriend coughs in the other room, I'm like, God damn it, I'm trying to think, So I just noticed the difference in my capacity to focus is very different. I still do a lot, but it's just totally a different world. I could juggle so much more when I was younger. I had so many trays in the air of 1,000 different things, and my tolerance for noise and distractions was very high, and now it's changed a lot. So I relate to Marion a lot in her piece because I totally feel like that person that's totally disheveled in my Zoom screen. Like, what the hell?
and it'll be there forever.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my God. It's hilarious.
Yeah, it's funny to think. I mean, I guess it's the focus or maybe the youthful energy. I mean, I was a single mom for most of those years, and I don't know how I did it. I had a day job that was writing. I wrote most of my first novel, as my son was growing up. Granted, it took me over 10 years to write that book because life, and motherhood. But yeah, and I think, there's the guilt, there's that element of guilt. I was never really into the PTA, and then I would think, oh, should I be? Am I not being, engaged enough? Am I not? But, I wanted to write. So I was like, well, who's got time to go to a PTA meeting? I've got to go and write a chapter.
They're going to make you write the newsletter,
Exactly.
You're going to find out you're a writer and be like, you get to write the newsletter.
Exactly.
Melanie,
yeah, there's a lot of that.
Sorry, did you have a writing community that did you have friends that were writers that you were able to, like, how did you, because I would think as a single mom, it would be very difficult to stay motivated if you didn't have somebody that you thought was going to did you have an agent? Like, well, who was waiting for this book? Besides,
nobody was waiting. No,
wow.
It was just,
it was in you. No,
nobody
awesome.
cared that I was writing this book.
Yeah.
I went through a divorce and moved to the DC area. And so I didn't know anybody here. My son was 5 at the time, and it was a struggle, but finding those, writing communities was kind of my way in. I started sort of, learning, I'd meet one person and, they would introduce me to someone else. I ended up joining, I think, a couple of writing groups that I was involved in. And most of the time my son was with me. He would be sitting over in the corner, or if we were at someone's house, you know, in the other room, and everyone knew that my son was going to be with me. So, you know, I give thanks to him for, you know, kind of hanging in there with me, because I dragged him from one writing event and one writing meeting to another.
But he must be so proud of you now, like of having a writer mom who's like so good.
Yeah.
And yeah, he is. Yeah, he is. Just say yeah. You know he is.
He's like, whatever, Mom.
Have you ever asked him what he remembers about it?
No, actually, that's I'm gonna ask him after this. I'm definitely gonna ask him. Yeah, I mean, I think it's just part of his world. You know, he doesn't sort of know anything else, so it's like, yeah, it's normal. My mom's involved in, you know, writing community, and that's just how it's always been. So, but yeah, I'm gonna ask him what his memories are of those times.
Great. Marion Winik, you didn't finish telling your story.
No, I just wanted to say my poor kids, because I write about them. Well, I mean, when Vince was in 5th grade, he had, you know, kids could actually read the Lunchbox Chronicles, which, so my son's father died of AIDS when they were 6 and 4. And I was a single mom then for about 5 years. And this period was not as bad as you would think. You know, basically, that's what the Lunchbox Chronicles was about, saying that I had kind of a beautiful little triangle with the boys, and I had a lot of people helping me, and I lived in Austin, where it was great. And anyway, so I write the Lunchbox Chronicles. So now years go by, and now the boys are old enough that people they know are reading the Lunchbox Chronicles. And at one point, it says that, oh, when my boys were born, I loved them so much, with their midnight blue eyes and their fingertip-sized penises. Children.
Nobody will forget it ever.
They will never forgive you.
You know, this was only the beginning of their trauma. I mean, this has gone on uninterrupted for years. And actually, for a while, Vince kind of ordered me to stop writing about him. So I wrote an essay about Vince telling me to stop writing about him. And he was like, no, Mom, that's not
what I meant.
How old was he when that happened? How old was he when he was aware enough that he was like, cut it out? This is my life. You can't have it.
They were aware of it, you know, like in 5th grade. Like I'm telling you, could have, but you know, they didn't but Vince didn't have any power then. So when he was older, I guess he was in his mid-20s, you know, and then what happened was, so I did kind of stop for a while. And then he got this, I went down to New Orleans to visit him, and we had this insane weekend, like that was just too good to not write down. And it involved like bar fights and, you know, crazy shit. And so I wrote it down, and then I sent it to him to see if he would let me use it. And his roommate read it, and his roommate loved it. And he's like, "Your mom is the coolest person in the world. You've got to publish this." So the roommate actually ended the moratorium, and that was
yay!
No, go roommates.
And he was the one that, I mean, the roommate was portrayed quite badly in the piece. I mean, he was the one who was in the bar fight, and he hadn't been through 32 years of this the way my kids have.
My son does not like me writing about him at all either. I did stand up when he was a teenager, and my opening line was, people ask how old my son was. I say he just turned asshole. So he wasn't a big fan. So I did, it's hard to compartmentalize, but they give you so much material that it's very hard not to use it. You know, so I agree with Marion on that front.
You're so funny.
I know. Exactly.
Well, now I just wrote my first thing about my grandchild, and I'm quite anxious that if they're going to be okay with it. So we'll see. You know, the parents of this baby are they're really different than me. They're so different. And they are much more conservative. And I mean, she's an orthodontist, and my son is a private equity, whatever, something. And, you know, they live in like a penthouse in Boston. You know, they have this electronic bassinet for the baby, and their whole life is unbelievable. So bar
fights.
I can just imagine what they're going to, you know, just so paranoid about. I have to not get forbidden to write about the kid. So I have to be
delicate.
Right. Easier to write a novel for sure.
If only.
Well, you've only written 9 books, Marion. Number 10.
Yeah, really.
Actually,
you just need to click into which, like, is it Dorian Gray? Okay, so is it Alice in Wonderland? Like, who's the character that your little grandchild is going to embody? And then you can just go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I've tried to write fiction with very bad luck. So
Really?
I admire you, Melanie, because it's really amazing to me how people can transform their real feelings and real, concerns into fictional situations. And I'm quite the fan of fiction.
Thank you for that. I am deathly afraid of writing about real things. I think it's easier for me to just go into fiction and add elements. It's sort of a hint of reality, but not really, and that makes it sort of safer for me to write about, I guess.
Have you written fiction, Marion?
I am. I'm on my 4th pass of a novel. And I have to say, it's just so freeing to not, when I've written 2 memoirs, and I just feel this obligation to be true to the people I'm writing about and not to offend people, like your grandchild. And so I just find it very freeing. The creative freedom you have writing a fiction is wonderful. And it's very loosely veiled as my own life anyway. So
Yeah,
but yeah, I'm really enjoying it.
I actually wrote a book, and my father actually saw it. It was fiction, but my father saw himself in it, and he got really upset about it. So I think it depends on the reader, maybe.
Yeah, that happens a lot. I mean, I'm thinking, there many times with fiction, people see themselves as thinly veiled, so-and-so characters.
Yeah, it's your life, and that's a big question. I mean, I think that deserves a whole evening in itself. Is what are you entitled to write about? And I personally feel like you're allowed to write about anything and everything. And I remember one of the firemen I wrote about being really upset that I they're very secretive about what goes on in the firehouse, and I was writing about that, and it really offended them. And they said, you couldn't write about it. I was like, well, you were in my orbit, so I kind of do get to write about you for this little brief moment of time. And, I do think you have the right to write about what's like your child. And, as much as it's hard, I do think it's hard for people who read about themselves. It's not fun sometimes, but the creative process would be so limited if we edited ourselves.
Well, I really couldn't, because I write so much about everyone that I'm close to. I have to take a different approach. So, I mean, I always say that I value the relationships over the writing. So I always show people stuff that they're in.
Yeah,
I might not. Your fireman, I might. It depends on how big a role he had, but I really try, because I believe that. I kind of don't totally agree that I have the right to, like, these people are people. They're not my character.
Right. Yeah.
So, and I have had some in my, some bad things have happened, worse than the fingertip penises. And,
I vet everything about people I write about in nonfiction. I do. Yeah. And I have been asked to change it, and I honor that. But I just think in terms of the process of writing, I think, creatively, you edit later.
Such a good point, because so many people stop themselves before they even write anything.
Exactly.
Because I can never write this because my mother, blah, 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 blah. So like they're so far so far in the future that the thing is published and your mother is reading it that it doesn't make any sense. So I'm on a big mission to tell people not to worry about that until much later.
I agree.
I totally agree. Yeah, absolutely. You can't.
I once had writer's block, and Helen Schulman said to me, "Write like they're dead." And
wow,
that really helped a lot. It really did. I just wrote, and I didn't worry about what they were going to say or think or anything. And I got through the block and finished my book. So
wow, good for you. I think my mother has to be dead before I could write about her, because I wrote a musical and it wasn't even her. And she asked for a disclaimer before we did it, and which made it obvious that it was her, because I said, my mom said to let you know that the mother in this piece is not my mother. And which of course like shone a bright light on it all. So it was kind of funny.
So, Melanie, you mentioned that you were a single mom. How, obviously you had all this financial pressure on top of your work, on top of the writing. How did you, obviously you went to writing groups and you had support, but it couldn't have been easy. So if you had a bit of advice for parents out there who are struggling, whether they be, a single parent, or whether they be, suffering from like brain fog, like I suffered from brain fog for years, what would that advice be?
I think it's all about community. It's finding the people who are going to support you. There were so many things that I could not have done if not for the teenager who was willing to look after my son after school so that I could finish my job and have time to come home. But it's creating community. It's finding those folks who can fill those spaces for you, because you're on your own. I mean, it's, everything is a concern. I remember my son was sick one evening and I needed to get him, I guess it was cough medicine or something from the pharmacy, but it was cold and I didn't want to take him out. And I just remember debating with myself for I don't know how long. Do I leave him? Do I take him? If I take him, I got to put him in the car and it's cold. And I ended up leaving him. And I was gone for maybe 15 minutes. But for those 15 minutes, I felt so overwhelmingly guilty.
Not just afraid.
All of the images of the place, fires happening. And I was an absolute wreck by the time I got back. And I just said, I vowed I'm never going to leave him again. But it's these moments of, what do you do? Like I have to make a decision right now. And I'm by myself. I don't have, that network. So it's finding that network. I think I had just moved to the DC area. So I didn't have anyone to sort of call. So yeah, get those networks. The community is huge.
I call it the favor economy, because it's like all these trading of favors. And I would think I'm not going to be afraid to ask people to do me favors, because then I will owe them a favor. And then they, and I would say, can you do this for me? But please ask me to do something for you, and
bartering was big.
Yeah.
Bartering was big.
I did a lot of that. Yeah. Barter babysitting. Couldn't have gone anywhere if I didn't do that.
But I wanna get into this. So in the green room, the archive bonfire was mentioned. And I would like to hear about the archive bonfire, please.
Oh, well, it just was. They were saying that they have everything I've ever written on a shelf or something, and I was like, I don't think so. I don't even have everything I've ever written on a shelf, and one reason is because when I moved from Pennsylvania to Baltimore in 2007 or 2008, my mother had just died, and I had just cleaned out my mother's house and gotten rid of everything. And so when I moved, I was very much in the mind of not leaving all this stuff for my poor kids to get rid of when I'm dead. Well, I had these giant Rubbermaid boxes with physical copies of every magazine that I'd ever had an article in. So there was like a zillion Parenting, a zillion American Way, a zillion, and a lot of other stuff. But I decided that I wasn't going to keep it anymore. And I burned like 4 giant Rubbermaid boxes full of stuff.
Wow.
I don't know.
Cathartic. and
It was
crazy.
good.
It's like all the things.
I kind of wish that it had been in the time when I could have digitized some of it before burning it. But
Yeah, I was going to say, do you regret it?
no, and you know what? The stuff that I didn't burn, like the remaining Rubbermaid boxes, I never look in those things anyway. So all's well that ends well. We don't have to worry that much about archives anymore with all the online stuff.
At least it was all published stuff. Imagine if it had been like boxes and boxes of the unpublished novels that you know.
Those well worth burning. I mean, I have
No, because of the burden. You know, like when people inherit their parents' unfinished, unpublished stuff, and then they have it, and they're like, "What do I do with my mother's, haiku collection? She wrote all this stuff, and she worked on it every day, but she never published one. Do you publish it? Do you That's like it's
such a great point. That's just made me think that I need to get rid of the two really, really awful novels that I wrote years ago.
There's gonna be like bonfires going across the country. Like,
we gotta get
then you have to like write something
son to
great,
read.
and you have to write great things and get it published. To make sure that there's stuff.
Well, I always think of Harper Lee when she didn't want that second book to be published, and it got published because she didn't destroy it. So that was her fault.
Good point.
So
Bonfire session coming up.
And I also I want to not be remiss, and Marion, congratulations on your play awards.
Oh, thank you.
You got all these, like, yay. And is there a production coming, or is it just the table read on the Zoom, or what's going on?
It's a Zoom festival, and I will post it on Parentis when I find out when it's happening. But yeah, it's a great short play that I'm hoping will get a production soon. But it'll be on Zoom for now, and then it won a couple of Zoom placements in different theater festivals. So I'll place it on your lovely website.
What's
Great.
it called?
We'll be happy.
What's it
my
called?
God, what's it called? Just One Day.
Ah, good title.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah. Helene said, "Bonfire of the Not So Vanities."
Good one, Helene. I like it.
You guys, we are near the end of our time together. I want to thank you all for coming, for talking. Marion, and Melanie, you guys come back anytime. You're wonderful. It's fantastic to have you. People out in the audience, whether you're watching right now or on the replay, know that you have until April 17th to enter the fellowship. If you are interested in community, Parentis is one. We would love to have you. So come and find out about joining us. We are on parentis.org. We have all kinds of cool resources for you. For instance, a database of writer-parent friendly retreats and things. We're going to find out from Melanie about the Bali one and see if that's writer friendly. I mean, parent writer friendly.
They don't do it anymore.
Yeah,
I'm afraid.
Yeah. So, like wave goodbye, because like they're all going away. So, bye. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having us.
Bye. Thanks for coming.